So 2.5 years ago, when I began talking to the leaders of, or I wasn't allowed to talk to the leaders of the Oneness movement 2.5 years ago in the spirit world, they sent some of their, what they called their underlings, if you like, at the time, to talk with me because I wasn't worth their attention at the time. Does that make sense? And when we had a chat and I started talking about some experiments that they could try, I also talked about with them this issue of over-cloaking people on earth and how damaging that was. Now, there were huge amounts of resistance to that discussion, and that resistance remained for nearly a period of 2 years until the spirits themselves started to see the truth of what was going on. Now that they can see the truth of what's going on, now they can see the damaging effects of what happens in an over-cloaking situation. And they also commented about what they can see in terms of what's happening on earth with regard to the situation. They can see these people walking around as oneness beings in an enlightened state, but in reality the emotional condition of the person is very much in disharmony with the state that they're walking around in because of the influence. Now, when you're at one with God, you do not need to be overcloaked to be in that state. You will be in that state yourself. You won't have to have any spiritual influence or any extra spiritual experiences to be in that state, because you yourself will be having God's love 24/7. Now, you remember he described this tingling sensation that went from the base of his spine to his crown. And he remained in this tingling place all the time. And he said it was very, very hard for him to operate in the real world, right? And he was always trying to get out of the real world and be alone and be by himself, because to be in the real world was just such a contrast. Well, when you're in a oneness state, while you will have those feelings, but they won't be coming from your base of your spine to your crown, they'll be coming from your crown to the base of your spine in the other direction. And also, what will be happening in that state is you will still be able to function in the real world constantly. In other words, you will be able to interact with every single person at the soul level that you meet or have ever met constantly. You will still be able to write a book. You will still be able to play a musical instrument. In fact, you will be able to do it in that state in the best possible way you could ever imagine in that state. So rather than there being a disconnection from what we call the real world, you will actually have the opposite thing occurring, where you begin connecting to the real world in a real level to everyone. So you've noticed the more and more we've got to know each other, and the more and more we've progressed together, like on the Divine Love path, there's more and more of a feeling of joining with each other. Isn't you ever noticed that? You know, you can feel it now in the room here, can't you, generally? Like, remember at the start, there were all these different people, some young, some old, some all from different backgrounds, hardly anybody talked to each other. Everyone would go their separate ways straight away. You remember all of that? How that was all occurring? And you notice as you're growing in love, all of a sudden things are changing there, and you're starting to have more real interactions with people. There's far more acceptance, far less judgment of everyone. Well, that will grow to a point where you will mirror God's acceptance and God's judgment, which obviously there is none coming from God, of everyone. And you will be in that state, and you'll never be able to get out of that state no matter what happens. Aside from if you reincarnated, of course, right? If you chose to do that, that depends on all of the emotional injuries of what world you're reincarnating into. But aside from that, you are going to be in this state of bliss constantly. But it won't be given to you. It will be because of the shifts and changes you have actually made inside of your soul. So that state is this state here is a real state. The state here is a facade. No matter how good it feels, it's still a facade. Now, if we understand that this kind of emotions that he does describe and more is available to you in the at-one-ment state, that obviously can provide a lot of motivation to dealing with these painful emotions, can't it? And remember yesterday I talked to you about having faith and how faith protects you? And one of the things we need to have on the Divine Love path is faith that we can actually here on earth reach the same state that, and actually be in a much more blissful state than many of these sixth sphere spirits who are over-cloaking people on earth are actually in. And we can do this while we're here, but all we need to do is be brave, and that sounds like might be hard sometimes, and courageous, right? And also be willing to feel every emotion and to be honest and truthful with ourselves about all of those emotions. Now, when I say all, obviously, you know, if we're coming from a first sphere state when we started, that's going to require quite a lot of dedication, doesn't it, to do that. But wouldn't it be better having a real state that means when you pass, and by the way, in that state your passing will probably be at either the hands of someone else or a choice, right? Rather than actually an old age dying process. When you pass, you will actually stay in that state. And you won't experience the terrible grief that the majority of people experience who are over-cloaked when they realise the disparity between their own condition and the condition of that was generated on earth through a spirit. Right? So can you see there are quite a lot of different contrasts between the real state and this facade type state. The facade type state often is instant in its manner of appearing. The real state takes time to develop. You can't instantly release all of your emotions and come to a point of at-onement probably without dying in the process, right? So, and even then you still have the prospect of having to release your emotions to do it. So the truth is that if anything happens in an instant manner, then it is a very high probability, and I'm saying to you all the time, it's the cause of some kind of spirit influence when it's like that. So also you notice from Hawkins' description, he said he automatically felt this love for everyone, right? Now, you will not automatically feel a love for anyone when you're in the real state. What will happen is you will have to release all of the emotions that cause you not to have a love for everyone in the real state before you get to a particular place. Does that make sense? He also said that he has these swings between terrible emotions and blissful emotions. When you're in this at-onement condition, you will never have a swing back to the old emotions. Right? You'll never be bipolar again. So you will actually stay in this state of bliss with God, and you'll be able to reflect that state constantly with everyone around you. In this state, he said, he abdicated his own will to the will of the presence. In this state, God wants you to actually feel your own will that's harmonious with love and do it. That's a very different state. In this state, when you're at one with God, you will actually be in a state of bliss, at one with God, but doing your own thing at every single moment, because your own thing is going to be completely harmonious with God's laws and completely harmonious with truth, and more importantly, completely harmonious with God's love. Right? Now here, that's not the case. What he's doing is abdicating his will to this presence, and that is giving away your entire life, basically. That's why there's so much pain associated with the passing. Because when you pass, you recognise that your whole life was lived for somebody else. And that's painful to become aware of that. So can you see the contrasts between what is the real state and what is this facade state that everybody is telling you is real but is not really real? They are created in totally different ways, and they are also experienced totally differently. And it's very important to see this contrast, so that when people tell you the story of what happened to them, when you're assisting them to work through different things, you understand what story is being told. Because when you hear the story, you go, wow, yeah, there goes the spirit again. Yep, I can see that spirit. And then you can connect with that spirit and say, why did you do that? You know, what's going on there for you? Why did you overcloak this person? And you can help more than one person in that interaction. But if you believe the person who's coming up to you saying, oh, I had this amazing experience, it's this and that, and now I'm enlightened and it's so amazing, and what you're feeling from them, in fact, is still all their rage and their anger and all of their other emotions, plus a connection with a spirit who also has a lot of emotions towards you as well, then state the truth of that to the person. It's better they learn the truth of that now than it is when they pass. Because if they learn it when they pass, they're just going to go through lots more pain. So my suggestion is to look at the contrasts between what real at-one-ment with God means and what you can call it Christed or whatever else you want to call it. I call it being at one with God. That occurs in the 8th sphere transition, so the 7th to the 8th sphere. That's when that point is reached. That is a very different place, emotionally, very different place than this place here, where your emotions are being constantly influenced by an external entity. And it's not what at-one-ment means. So if we can now have some questions about all of that, I'm happy to answer them. Okay.